Alrighty, guys, gals, non-binary pals. I'm super excited for today's interview conversation. I don't know what to call these things, but we have April from Smalletics, and I'm super stoked. So I was actually your channel and your videos were brought to my attention from my producer Rachel, who brings most of the things to my attention because she's always out there searching things out. And she brought up your channel and your videos, and she was like, I think this could be interesting because actually the vast majority of the people that watch my channel are women. And she said that she just feels like a lot of the videos that you put out could, like, you know, really help women that are maybe trying to lose weight or just getting into fitness. So without further ado, I don't want to have to explain what you do, but, you know, who are you and what do you do? And yeah, again, thanks for being on.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Thank you, John. Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. It's an honor, honestly. So yeah, I'm April. I started Smalletics in 2018. And I started it to support my fellow petite women. I'm 5'1", but technically everyone always asks, like, what's the definition of petite? Honestly, I go by the fashion industry, which is just 5'4" and shorter, but it's like, whatever. If you're 5'5" and you identify with it, like, join the community. Nobody's really, you know, it's really not about that. And it started as a community. And then it became programs. A lot of what we do is grounded in science. I'm sure we'll get into that today. And a lot of it is grounded in just the mindset of sort of what it's like to feel small and really feeling and learning how to feel empowered and strong and healthy in your body, which I think is a feeling and not like a height. It's not related to being tall and having like long legs as a woman or being sexy. Like, it's a feeling. You can cultivate it. And there's many different vehicles for cultivating it in your life. But what has been true in my life is through sports and through athletics, through lifting weights. That's how I've been able to kind of activate that part of me and let it kind of shine into other parts of my life. So a lot of what we do is fitness programming. It's mostly strength training based. And we do nutrition programming as well. So my background, I used to be an internationally ranked fencer. I did it for 20 years and I was training to go to the Olympics. And then I started Smalletics and I retired. And I got my personal training certification. I got my nutrition certification and started doing this full time as the community grew. And now we have a team. We have dietitians who can address things that are out of the scope of my expertise. We have, you know, contractors. It's grown a lot. So that's kind of like the elevator story of everything.
Yeah, it sounds really cool. Like, it just sucks for me because I'm, like, for people that don't know, I'm 6'7". And so, like, I'm very tall. And so I want to be able to do it, you know, because I'm like, I'm actually might be closer to 7 foot. I haven't checked my height for a while. No, but I think, I'm sorry. That was a joke I've been waiting to tell the whole time because that's how I am.
It's hilarious. I'm really gullible. So for like 1 second, I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, I'm very tall. Like, the ceiling is just right here for me. No, but I think it's really interesting. One thing that I think is really important for everyone in general, but something I've noticed as being a male that makes content for a very large base of women, it's been something that I've learned over the years is how much more women have faced, like, more beauty standards, right? So that's something that I remember when I first started, I was like, well, men also struggle with it. And, like, that's true. But from what I've seen and, like, the content that I've made for so long, women in particular have faced more beauty standards than men have. Like, men definitely face their own in certain ways. But I think that it's really cool to, you know, find something that works for you and then want to share that with other people. So, like, what was because I know that you kind of went into you being a fencer, but, like, was there a moment that you were going through this journey and you thought to yourself, okay, these things that I've learned, I want to share them with other people? And then, again, to piggyback off that question, just so I'm not asking you a million, why did you decide to do it the way that you do now, where it's science-based and it's not super gimmicky and clicky and, like, so cheesy with a lot of the fitness? Like, why did you decide to do what you do the way that you do it, I guess is what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah. Okay. So first question, there was like a click moment for me. I would say, when I was fencing, I've always been in athletics, right? And I always felt my most powerful, and I didn't think about my appearance when I was on the fencing strip. Like, that was like my time. I was in the zone. I didn't care what I looked like. Like, you look disgusting. You're like, if anyone's ever watched fencing, it's just like head to toe equipment. So you're virtually like your body's totally covered up. And it was just a time to like not care about those things, just be free of like society standards. But off the strip, I didn't feel the same way. Like I didn't feel like I personally looked like a professional athlete. Like I didn't have a six pack. I had a lot of insecurities. And also something you mentioned, like the beauty standards growing up as like a 13-year-old girl were like so rough. Like everyone on magazines, super tall women, long legs, no one, like thigh gaps, big boobs. Like it was just like everything I didn't have growing up. And in the fencing community, or around that time I was fencing off the strip, I wanted to feel more like I was growing up. I was like stepping into my womanhood. I was young. I wanted to feel more, kind of like claim my own acceptance on my body, work on myself. And of course, these things kind of like have a way of like how you do one thing is how you do everything, right? So I knew, you know, when you build confidence outside of your sport, it can transfer into your sport and vice versa. And at the time, I went the complete wrong way about it. Like I started running so much. I started doing like HIIT training every day. This was on top of my fencing training when I was in high school. I would do like 40 minutes of sprints. I'd skip breakfast. I'd have like a piece of bread for lunch. I was basically starving myself at a really young age, trying to fit this standard while also putting my body through intense physical training, mental training for the sport. And I was actually seeing like all of the opposite effects of what I wanted. Like I had stubborn fat. Again, I've never been super overweight, but for me, I felt like weak, fatigued. I felt miserable. I was thinking about food all the time. I hated being photographed. I couldn't go to the beach with my friends without thinking about like how I looked or what they thought of me in a bathing suit. And then after I graduated college, I did cardio all through college. I kept forcing it. It was like year after year. I was like, maybe this time it'll be different, right? And then after college, I picked up weights for the first time, and I really committed. Like I did 12 weeks, and I went in on strength training like 4 or 5 days a week. And I saw such a transformation in my body composition. And then not so much about weight loss here, more body composition. So just losing fat and gaining muscle, because I was at a healthy weight to start. I stopped doing so much cardio, although still there's a place for cardio in every program. Like you need your cardiovascular health. But I didn't rely on it as a fat loss tool. I started eating like more whole foods, learning about nutrition, just getting educated about like what's real here and what's like BS, like all the stuff we've consumed in magazines our whole lives. And I had a crazy physical transformation also along the way, or crazy for me. I mean, you know what it's like I'm so in awe of your story, and your transformation too. But I also saw like sort of like an inside out transformation. So the mentality of going from like starving yourself and feeling like, you know, dragging your body through this to like feeling empowered, feeling strong, feeling fueled. And so that was my click moment, that 12 weeks. It was like, I remember it was the fall. And at the time I was a science copywriter at a pharmaceutical company. I went to Cornell University and I studied sciences, and I was reading about, you know, looking at studies, writing about science. And I just decided I had access to all those like all the published studies and stuff through my job. I was like, let me just look up if height plays a role at all in like any of this. Like, why did the weights work so much better for me than the cardio? And I basically just started learning about metabolism and how important it is to have more muscle in your body so that you can burn more rest. And it's not always about, you know, like stress inducing workouts and pumping cortisol through your body. And so that was the science that's gotten roped into our approach. It's all about metabolism, but of course this would benefit anyone of any height, but it's especially beneficial for smaller women who, you know, have fewer calories they can consume in a day to begin with. I think that just answered the first question you asked.
Yeah. No. It's all good. Like, I mean, there are things that I want to say anyways. It's interesting hearing that story, right? So the first thing that popped into my mind when you were talking about being like embarrassed to go to the beach and stuff like that, right? Because I know that there are probably a lot of people watching that are like, what? That's ridiculous. Like, I'm embarrassed and I'm this amount of weight, blah, blah, blah. The thing that's really interesting to me is it just shows how detrimental these like unrealistic beauty standards are, right? So like, even though there might be people that are watching that maybe see that have maybe seen your before and after and like saw your before, and they might think to themselves, well, if I was at that point now, I'd be happy. It's like, it doesn't, like, I understand where they're coming from, but it's like, that's how detrimental this stuff is, because it makes you feel like there is something wrong with you, even though you might, be a completely normal weight. It's not like there's anything wrong, but like, it's just interesting hearing that, right? Because like, if we go to the extreme of me, like when I'm 300 plus pounds, of course, I was also very, like, I didn't go to the beach. I live in San Diego. I never went to the beach. And if I did, your boy had a shirt on the entire time. You know what I'm saying? And so like, I was obviously felt very similarly, but it's just, there's different ends of the spectrum there.
Yeah.
And so,
there
and
definitely.
Yeah, 100%. And then like hearing, it makes complete sense, like hearing why the science part of everything kind of became so important to you, because you went to a very nice school and you have a big brain, and that's great. And so that obviously, but I think that stuff is so important to me, because when it comes to the fitness industry, when it comes to this stuff, like a lot of the stuff that I make now is calling out the BS, right? For lack of a better term. It's so incredibly frustrating. And it's everywhere, right? It's in weight loss, yes. It's in muscle gain, it's in just fitness in general. It's everywhere. And it's frustrating for me. I'm going on a tangent now, but it's like when I call it out, people are like, oh, you're just being negative. It's like, no, this information is bad, and they're trying to sell it to you like it's fact, and it's wrong. Like, you deserve to know the truth, right? And so I think that it's really, really awesome that you are kind of taking that approach. And so like when you first started like lifting, and when you decided to stop doing like the amount of cardio that you were doing, was there anything like, was that were you nervous about that? Like how was that for in your mind?
Oh yeah. I think the first 6 weeks I was like, sure, I was getting bigger. Like I had this fear of getting bigger. I was like, weights are definitely going to make me bigger. Like there's no way they're not. It wasn't until later that I realized like nutrition is basically the most important thing in terms of if you're weight training. Like if you're eating in a surplus, you will look bigger, you will gain more muscle faster, you might gain some fat. If you have your nutrition at maintenance calories or a deficit, you're not going to look big or bulky, especially as a woman lifting weights. But that came much later. I'd say I was like blindly trusting the process at the time. And I had all sorts of fears like coming up through that experience.
So what are like, now that you've worked with, you and like your whole team have worked with so many women, like are there any, I know that I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but are there any like things that you have noticed that are kind of like commonly asked questions, or like things that you have to get over with a lot of women that maybe they struggle with when you start working with them, or anything like that?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that there's so many.
Yeah.
The biggest thing is, and I'm sure you get DMs like this too. Everyone wants there to be like one way to do things. And what they don't realize is that everybody's in a different place when they start a program or when they start their journey. Even if you're the same weight, you're probably in a different place metabolically. You're eating different foods. You're eating a different number of calories every day. So with the large range of women we see, they're all petite. Some of them are obese and petite, so it's just a height thing. Some of them, have weight they want to gain, but they're all short. And some of them come in eating under 1,000 calories a day and need to increase their calories, or they're holding on to stubborn fat. They're in a place where they're miserable, they don't feel good. And then there's some women who are eating in a caloric surplus. More like 1,900 calories for a petite woman would be hard to swing unless you're training like many hours a day. And we help them, not necessarily, it's not always about eating less, but sometimes it's about eating better. And when you start eating better, you're fuller more and you end up eating less. Like just looking at what are you eating, like whole foods, or there should be a balance. It doesn't have to all be whole foods. But so I think there's this idea, like people will be like, in my DMs, they'd be like, IF, like, should I do it, intermittent fasting or not? And it's like, well, first of all, what are you asking? Like, we have to look at what's the question. Is IF good for weight loss? Is IF good for gut health? Like there's a different answer, and there's different research for what we're evaluating it, like the context. And so I think people get really confused in the fitness space because they want black and white answers. But first of all the studies are in like mostly white men. The demographic is like one demographic. And second of all, it depends like what's the lens through which we're like evaluating all this, right? Like what's the goal? What's the purpose? Because they could have a different answer depending on like what we're looking at it through.
Yeah. And like, That's such a good answer, because this is something that I deal with constantly. Is obviously the questions I deal with are weight loss, but it's like, is this good for weight loss? Is this good for weight loss? And I'm like, any of these could work. This is, again, me going on tangent, but like, any of these could work if you're in a deficit and you figure all that stuff out, and you're I mean, mainly calories, but if you want to focus on macros, that's okay too. But like, if those are in check, then yes. But will IF work for you? I don't know. You can maybe try it out, and maybe you get way too hangry and you feel terrible for the day and it doesn't work. Maybe it works really great for you with keto. Maybe that'll work. Maybe it won't. I'm not the biggest fan of that. People know that, but we're not going to go into that. It's people want these yes or no answers when, I mean, literally almost every single time when it comes to fitness and weight loss, the answer is it depends.
Yeah, I know.
It just
does.
is.
It just depends.
And it sounds like a cop-out, but it's like, if you want me to actually look at you as an individual, right, and answer the question for you, the answer is always going to be it depends, and then maybe once I get a lot of information about you and I know a lot, which is what coaching is for, I'm sure, right? You get all this information, and then you can answer, no, I don't think that'll work for you, or yes, that might be the good option. But if, as just like asking a question on Instagram, my answer is always going to be it depends, because I'm not going to sit there and be like, oh yeah, yes, this is definitely the right one. And I found out that usually if someone will tell you that, the next thing they'll tell you is, yeah, just buy this from me. Here you go. Here's the link. And it's like,
yep.
Oh, dude.
100%. Yeah, they have some kind of vested like interest in the answer. Yeah, and I mean, you summed it up. I think a lot of this stuff, people want to put things in categories, good or bad. Like, I saw you talking about like diet soda or like artificial sweeteners. Like, they just want to know, is it good or bad? And again, it depends. and it's not just it depends, but here's the long list of questions that I need to ask you first before we could come up with a, like, probably most likely the right answer for you. But you also have to then go test it out for like 6 weeks and collect some data on how your body is going to react to that. I mean, there's definitely commonalities and approaches and good common starting places, but everyone's going to find their own path eventually.
Yeah. And then, so talking about like petite women or just being smaller, I think that's also really interesting, because that's obviously the difference for me. So I actually am 5'8", so I'm not 6'7", and I weigh like 210 pounds, right? So I'm a relatively like shorter, kind of muscular guy, I guess. And I eat, like, I can eat like a good amount of calories per day. Like, usually I'm usually around 3,000, right?
Wow,
and then when
great.
I was training for the triathlon, it was like closer to 4. But like something that I used to do quite a bit on my channel was full day of eatings, but then I kind of stopped doing them. One, because the food I eat is very boring and it's the same stuff over and over again. But also I almost felt bad because I eat so much, and most people that are following are like currently trying to lose weight, because I'm not trying to lose weight, right? And maybe they're smaller than me, so they'd be like, I could never eat that much. And it's like, the point of these videos isn't me ever to say this is what you should eat, right? It's just me trying to share that. And so I can only imagine it must be so much more difficult if you're a smaller woman, more petite woman. Like, the amount of calories that you need is just going to be lower. And so I'm sure it's probably frustrating hearing when people are like, if you're ever under 1,500 calories, that's bad. It's like, well, it just depends. Like, obviously, I don't want people to be in super low calories, but, just kind of like going off of that, when you hear stuff like that, or as far as just being a petite woman and then trying to lose weight, like, what are like the little, like, the differences for someone that might be in that position?
Yeah. So the biggest problem I see is women, everyone will relate to this. I think everyone at some point who's tried to get in shape, depending on how they define that, they've gone and looked up like a calorie calculator, right? Online. It's like, you'll search like how many calories, and there's all these generic calculators, and they're calculating an estimation of how many calories you should be eating if you want to lose weight. That's where the journey starts for many women, especially petite women. And this is where, to me, it's very scary and problematic, because these are formulas. Height is a variable in the Harris-Benedict equation, which calculates BMR. So when they go to calculate your metabolism, if your height is lower, you're going to get a lower number out of that. But then they apply their formula for your calorie deficit, and it's the same for a tall person as it would be for a small person. So if a tall, larger person is eating 3,000 calories, they might be told to go on like a 500 calorie deficit. But then they'll say the same thing to a petite woman who's eating 1,000 calories a day. And then it tells her, like, eat 500, like something that's extreme, but like a lot of times they'll come out and they'll get like a number that's below 1,000 from these websites, and they try to do it. I've done this myself. Like I can't, like, I'm not sure you can tell, I've actually gone down this path before I knew better, trying to eat like 1,000 calories a day, which is miserable. And, at that point, that's too few calories in a day for most people. Like it's like a children's amount of food. So it's somewhere for petite women. It depends where their starting place is, but they're going to be in a lower threshold than people of taller heights or people who weigh more in general. And they need to start with, if they're going to go in a deficit, they first have to be in a place where they have room to cut from. And I say, before we even get to a deficit, let's work on something more sustainable where you could still change your body composition and possibly lose weight without focusing on a steep deficit. For example, like let's look at the foods you're eating, right? Like what is the composition of your diet? Not just talking about protein, fats, and carbs, but like, is it mostly processed? Is it whole foods? Like, are you ordering out every night? There's like a lot that you can clean up in just looking at like your lifestyle before you start dieting and restricting severely. So, and a lot of times you'll have a more successful weight loss journey or body recomposition journey if you go that more sustainable route, which is why we tell petite women, we teach body recomposition mainly, unless you have a lot of weight you want to lose. We've also helped petite women lose like 65, 70 pounds. We've done that too, but they're in a kind of a different camp. For most petite women that we work with, a lot of them want to tone up. They want to just like drop a few pounds. Yeah. They want to like gain some muscle. They want to learn about like the foundational education about nutrition and fitness for their body. And so it's like small changes. It doesn't have to be what the calorie calculator tells you. You don't have to drop 500 calories off your daily intake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like something that I actually recommend a lot of times to people is tracking, like figuring out your TDEE. But that's something that I always try and like caveat. I was like, again, these are just like calculators. These are just numbers, right? Like it's not any sort of like, this is the definite thing that you need to do. It's all about kind of experimenting with that number. But I mean, if it shoots out, which I actually have never tested it, like for me, like I usually test it for like, if you're like really large, or if you're like my size. That's usually the two that I kind of look at, just to show the difference in calories needed for someone who's, 400 pounds versus someone who's 200. But I guess I've never really checked, like if you're, 120 pounds and you're 5'0" or whatever, and like what number does it give you then? But yeah, like, so what would you say is if someone, like, say a woman comes to you, right? They're like, I went and I tracked my TDEE, or I tried to figure out how many calories I should be eating, and it told me to eat 700 calories. So I've been trying to do that for X amount of time, and I can't do it, right? How do you guys work from there? I don't want to like make you feel like you need to tell your secrets, but I'm assuming that's a pretty common thing that happens with you guys.
Yeah, most of the time they can't stick to that, so they did it for like a few weeks on and off, and it's not going to damage your metabolism to do that like for the short term. It's not good, but it's not going to do anything like irreversible. So what we have everyone do is start with a 3-day food diary or food journal. It's best to use like an app that you can just scan the barcode on food, like MyFitnessPal or MyMacros. Not saying you track for the rest of your life, but just like, let's do an audit. Let's remove the judgment let's just look at the data and look at what you're eating. We have them eat, me and my team of dietitians, we have them eat according to what their appetite, whatever, eat normally, don't restrict, don't do that diet thing you were doing, don't do what your neighbor Sally told you to do, don't do a juice cleanse, just like eat normal and track it for 3 days and give it to us. That's usually a more accurate number of the number of calories, like their maintenance level, like where they're at, their TDE. And then from there, we can look at, okay, if it's really, really low, we need to work on increasing your calories and offsetting the increase in calories with a little more movement. We need to get your muscle up through strength training. And if they're in a surplus, then it's like, okay, we're still going to get you moving with strength training, but let's see, maybe we can change, we can make better substitutions. Or if it's really high, we can probably cut 150 calories. I don't know. It depends on the person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thing that I've noticed a lot is you hear, I'm sure you've heard this a lot. You hear a lot, oh, I started eating more calories and I lost weight. So when I hear that, I know where the person, okay, if it's not someone trying to sell something. So if it's someone trying to sell something, I'm just like, that's BS. But like, if it's someone that's like honestly feels this way, something that I've noticed is in their head, they maybe think they're eating more calories, but if you're to look at their weekly calories, they're actually eating less. So like the thing that I've noticed is a lot of people, they'll be like, I was eating only 700 calories and I couldn't lose weight. Right. But in reality, they maybe were eating 700 calories for maybe 2 days. And then the third day they would eat way more. Or even like 400 calories more or whatever it might be. But in their head, because they told themselves I'm going to eat 700 calories, they just like, it's almost like those days where they went off plan, they don't like track them, you know? And so by upping this person's calories to whatever the number is, 1,300, whatever it ends up being, they are able to actually stick to that number, even though it's a little bit higher, and they're not having those days where, I don't want to say like they're binge eating, but maybe they are, or they're just overeating. And so in their head, they're like, I'm eating more, but I'm losing weight. When in reality, the total calories for the week is actually lower. Is that something you've noticed or something that you do with your clients and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. There's calorie deficit, it can't really be argued with. People do argue with it. It is scientifically true, but for women especially, there are a lot of other factors. Like I think it's a little oversimplified. Like I definitely have seen women who have been yo-yo dieting for many years. Maybe they're postmenopausal, or they have hormonal issues, or they've just they've metabolically adapted to a lower calorie limit, which they can get it back up. It might require a little bit of weight gain temporarily before they can there's a lot, this is like the set point theory. There's a lot of emerging research on it. It's a theory still, but I do believe in that. I do believe in metabolic adaptation. I think you can slow down your metabolism if you're chronically under eating. But you're right. A lot of people are just not tracking like the fact that they like eat 500 calories during the week and salads. And then on the weekend, they have like 30 margaritas and like binge eat because they those days don't count. Right. And it's like the accountability factor isn't there. Or they're just not tracking properly, or they think that they're burning a lot more calories working out than they really are, which is really common too. People think they can just like, if they work out, they can eat whatever they want, but working out barely does anything. Like it doesn't burn that many calories. So yeah, there's so much human error, but I also think there is some truth and science behind also like metabolic adaptation. And if you get too low, you're just turning off the system. Like, you're losing muscle. So you're going to burn less at rest. Like you're just shutting down all of the like fat burning like mechanisms in your body, which is not good either.
Yeah. One other thing is, one thing that I like to kind of like have people focus on is when you are at a super low calorie number, this is something you notice a lot with people that are maybe competing, is your NEAT, your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, goes way down, right? So these are things that you are, doing that you don't even realize, right? Like how I'm standing while we're talking and I'm kind of moving around. And I don't like to say walks are necessarily neat because I think that's actually exercise, but like you maybe are like going to the bathroom more. You don't mind kind of fidgeting a little bit more. Like all those things, when you're not in a severe deficit, they go up, right? And so you start eating a little bit more calories, but you are also burning a little bit more calories, just naturally having more energy, right? And like all of those things go into play. It's like, I agree that it's not just like, it's not as black and white, especially I'm not by no means, I mean, you are, but by no means am I an expert when it comes to like women and hormones and all that stuff. I understand that definitely goes into play, and I don't like to act like I know all of that stuff. But that definitely makes it more difficult for women as well, I think, for sure.
I'm not an expert in hormones either. I'm not a doctor, but we do have medical professionals on our team. And there are some cases where they really are eating very few calories. And it's like, if they eat a calorie over 1,000, they gain weight. And in a lot of cases, the commonality with those women is, severe dieting for many years. And what we usually do is, if we've gone through everything, we usually recommend some, go get your hormones tested, go get a blood panel. Like we need to like pull in more data essentially beyond the scope of like a weight loss program. There's always an answer. There's always something going on in the body, but it's like, how curious are you willing, like how far are you willing to go to like find answers and be real and honest with yourself and look at your behaviors and, the food you eat and the type of exercise you do or don't do. And sometimes it is hormonal, but in most cases, I think we blame things like hormones and whatever more than it's actually happening. But I think there's still cases.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I this isn't even an interview anymore. It's more of a conversation. Like I said, this is what happens. But one thing that I always tell people, especially if they're going to work with someone, but even if they're just going to try and do it on their own, is like you have to be brutally honest. If you're not honest with yourself, and especially if you're working with a coach, and you're like, oh, I mean, it's like all you're doing is you're just hurting yourself. Because like your coach can't read your mind. Yeah, you're wasting. And if you're working with a coach, you're wasting money, right? But even if you're trying to do it yourself, and you're like, especially like if you're tracking with MyFitnessPal or whatever it might be, and you like that you're eating a little bit more, but you're not putting it in. Like the only person you're lying to is yourself. Like you have to be brutally honest. And this is like when someone hits a plateau or whatever, right? They always ask me, what should I do? And I'm like, you first and foremost, you have to be honest with yourself. Are you eating the amount of calories that you say you're eating? Is your activity the level that you are saying that it is? Like all of those things matter. And if you're not being honest with yourself, none of the other steps that you take are going to probably work because you're starting from a point of a lie, I guess,
Yeah. Yeah. And it's well-intentioned. I mean, nobody, I think it's like we do a lot of mindset work too in Petite Power, our program. And a lot of it's like awareness, which is why I think fitness ends up lending itself to so many other self-improvement aspects, because you have to be so self-aware and willing to look at those behaviors and acknowledge them and admit them to yourself. And you also have to learn how to detach judgment from them. Like the number on the scale is literally a number, but we put meaning on it. So you have to do that in our work. And obviously there's so many, we work on that together, and a community can really help with that too. But all of the data and the numbers they should just be useful, and it's all about how you use them, and they're not judging you. Like you're judging yourself.
Yeah, 100%. So, okay, kind of like pivoting a little bit, we've talked a lot about metabolism, and that's a word that's thrown around a lot. I used to joke around when I was heavier. I used to be like, I don't have a metabolism, or my metabolism is broken. Like I used to say that all the time. I personally believe that metabolism is tied to things that are happening. Like there's a way to explain your metabolism, right? For the most part, things that you are doing. But so I kind of wanted to ask you if you could just kind of give an overview, maybe if you're explaining metabolism to someone that is like where I was at the start, where I just thought metabolism, I was the person that thought metabolism was just random. Like some people had a fast one, some people had a slow one. It was how you were born, and there's literally no reason for it other than genetics, right? Right. And so if you could explain, if you're talking to someone and say you're trying to explain to them metabolism, how would you explain it to them? So
really, metabolism is a catch-all phrase for every little process, chemical, biological process happening in the body at once. It's that's why it's confusing, because it's literally billions of little interactions in your body. But when people talk about it, they're mostly saying how many calories they can eat in a day without gaining or losing weight. It's what can I eat? And fast metabolisms are people who can eat supposedly a lot and never gain weight. And slow metabolisms are supposedly people who eat barely anything and gain weight, or they look at food and gain weight. What actually a recent study came out a week ago. I don't know if you saw it. It was in the New York Times, and it showed that despite what everyone says, another misconception, people think that your metabolism slows. After college, people put on extra weight and they're like, well, it's my metabolism, it's slowing down because I'm in my 30s now. They found that your metabolism doesn't actually start change, biologically changing until about 60 years of age. So everything we do from now to 60, we're mostly just making it up. Yeah, right. Sorry guys. We just end up moving less. We get
everyone. We need new excuses. We need to figure out a new excuse. Everyone in the chat, figure it out. Come on.
It was a real downer of a New York Times article, but yeah. So when I talk about metabolism, I mostly mean how many calories can you eat in a day? If I say a petite woman has a slower metabolism naturally, I just mean we have fewer calories we can literally eat in a day compared to a tall person. Mm-hmm. But it's not slower. It's just we are smaller creatures. So it's just a lower threshold.
So what would you, I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but what would you say are some of the main contributing factors to someone's metabolism, I guess?
Mm-hmm. The one we have the most control over is our body composition. So how much muscle are you carrying? Like the basically the one of the only ways, the best ways to increase your metabolism naturally, like forget about supplements and fat burning pill, like this stuff is trash. The only way you can actually change your metabolic rate is to physically have more lean muscle tissue. Muscle is lean, but muscle tissue in your body, you have to have more of that if you want to have a burn more calories at rest. Have a faster metabolism means you burn more calories doing nothing. So yeah, the biggest thing we can do is start to put on some muscle. And over time, over the course of the year, you're burning more calories at rest, but you're eating the same. So you don't increase your calories by too much or a lot or at all. You will theoretically burn fat. It will be slower. That's why body recomp takes, more like 6 months. But as you change your lifestyle, you slowly put on muscle. You start to also burn fat at the same time. And they can both happen at the same time. It's not fat turning into muscle. That doesn't happen. But you can just, change your body composition, and that changes how your body uses calories and how it spends calories, basically.
Yeah, and that was like exactly what I was kind of like hoping you would say, I guess, because that's one thing I think, like putting on muscle has for me 1000% helped me maintain my weight loss. Like I know that for a fact, right? Having the amount of muscle I have and being able, like what that correlates to me is being able to eat the amount of calories that I can eat every day and not gain weight, right? That's the correlation, right? So that is something that I think is like super important. And I understand, like, to so many people, especially those of us who maybe are like pretty overweight that want to go to the gym, it can be very scary and very daunting. But like just taking that step to start lifting or even doing body weight workouts at home, just using your muscles I know it might not feel the same as like going on a run and being like super sweaty and like, and I'm not saying don't run. I mean, I freaking did a triathlon recently, right? Like I'm not saying that you can't do that, but it's like, understand that just because cardio maybe burns more calories in the moment, it doesn't, like, if we're looking at long term, putting on more muscle will definitely give you more options in the future, I guess, right?
Yeah, I think that's such an important mindset shift. Like if we can just get people to look at the future self, like the longer term outcomes, like you said, like weight loss management, like keeping it off. And like, that's going to be so much of a better long-term outcome for everyone. And like, how many times have you gotten a DM? I bet you get this a lot. That's like, I have a lot of weight to lose. Should I do cardio first or lift weights? Like, what should I do first? Should I do cardio to lose the weight first? And it's like, no, needs to be integrated. Like the weights are going to help you do the thing that you want to do. Cardio will too, but like you need both. You need to build muscle if you like really want to lose the weight sustainably.
Yeah. And I think that I can only imagine, like, for like a petite woman or just like women in general, that's probably even like a woman that's like overweight in general, is like, there's like, because when you're overweight, you feel the stigma of going to the gym, right? But then when you're a woman, you also feel a stigma about going to the gym. So those two together, it's probably, I can understand that it's daunting. And I'm not just saying like, do it. It's fine. It's freaking hard. Like I get it. I understand.
It's hard.
But just like really think about, again, if you really can't do the gym, find stuff to do at home. You can get adjustable dumbbells, something, right? But yeah, I mean, I think that that's such an important thing that so many people skip over, for sure.
Yeah, and I feel like everything that we've been saying too, we're making it sound really easy. None of this stuff is easy. Like just because we're saying it, like it's not easy. I've never been overweight, but I've worked with a lot of overweight women, and I don't personally have the experience, but I can appreciate that this is not as easy as execution. Like there's going to be like so much discomfort emotionally, physically, mentally. But it's like, for me, the message is like, you deserve that. Like you deserve what's on the other side of that. The feeling you're going to feel, the empowerment, like everybody deserves to feel that way. And it's worth it,
Yeah. Something that I say a lot is like, it's simple, but that doesn't mean that it's easy, right? Like when it comes to losing weight and putting on muscle, like the actual things that you need to do, like they're relatively simple. It's not like rocket science, but that doesn't mean that it's easy, especially because of the fact that you have to do it day in and day out, and has to become like there are so many things that have to actually work into play. But that doesn't mean, like, just because it's a simple thing does not mean that it's an easy thing, right? And that's something that's really, really important to me. All right.
So
well, to end this, just so we're not talking forever, like, is there anything anything or like a motto or just something that you want to make sure if someone is watching this, watching this video, you want to make sure they go home with? Like, what is that thing?
I think it's honestly, like, I know we talked a lot about weight loss and everything, but it's really like, no matter your size, you can feel really powerful. You get to decide that. I think that health is something that helps you feel powerful. And it's not about how tall you are, what your weight is. And if you can like learn to lift weights and like use that as your way to channel that power, that's what I would want for every woman. I want them to feel like they have access to their most powerful, highest self, and that they're working to serve that woman every day and not a version of themselves that they don't fully like love. Mm-hmm. That's my most important thing for petite women out there.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much for being on the channel. I appreciate it.